Thank you for having me today, Rayham, and on this very, very important topic of COP30.
So how do you assess the overall outcome of the Amazon summit? Were there any actual meaningful breakthroughs in it?
Well, Rayham, one of the things we saw is that all of the participants, the Latin American countries, were going into COP30 with a great deal of hope and enthusiasm for a collective effort to protect their environment. Indeed, that was the theme of this year's COP30, strengthening protections for the environment. But what people are waking up to is this climate change is really the enemy of the environment for many reasons. And perhaps your viewers may recall in COP28 when Sultan Abu Jabbar made a statement very controversial. He said, first, there's no evidence that phasing out fossil fuels is going to help us reach this 1.5 centigrade degree cooling. Two, phasing out fossil fuels will result in no socioeconomic development for poor countries and poor populations. And he also said that the climate change is he did not highlight climate change. And because he pointed this out, he received a great deal of approbation and criticism. However, Sultan Abu Jabbar made excellent and very correct points. And one of the reasons that we see the COP30 meeting in Brazil has not had good results, in Bogota, has not had strong results, tepid results. That is because the rainforest is a giant prize. It's a resource for multinational corporations. They want the rainforest. And indeed, who else was at COP30? We saw giant corporations such as Google, Nestle, Shell Oil had representatives there. And that's because the biggest threat to the rainforest is not, as we like to say, Brazil, Colombia, South American countries deforesting their own rainforest. It's because these giant corporations go in and they take over the rights under the processes of the International Monetary Fund, Bank of International Settlements.
Yes.
These corporations trap these countries into a debt trap. And the money we loan them is not for their own betterment. It's not for sanitation, education, infrastructure projects that
It's to
benefit the
extort
poor.
these countries basically into giving up forests. Am I correct in saying this?
Yes, you are absolutely correct, Rayham. We use this language of wanting to protect the environment, and then we go in and we expropriate and exploit the resources that are there for our own economic benefit and trade.
Yes.
And we leave the people of the country poorer and less well off, even though their leaders may be getting a little bit of enrichment themselves. So this is climate change, and these COP mechanisms are a front for the continued exploitation of developing countries. And if I may make one more point, this is very important. The term fossil fuel, we should stop using the term fossil fuel. It is a propaganda term to confuse and muddy our thinking and prevent us from speaking clearly about the issues. We should say oil, gas, diesel, hydroelectric, because these are very important topics. They're critical to our well-being and our thriving, especially developing nations. Developing nations need cheap electricity, sanitation, schools. They do not need giant corporations to go in and weaken their environmental protections and undermine them in the form of COP30 participation.
Okay, now there's a proposed $125 billion forest fund, which sounds very promising. But do you think this is more of a PR campaign or a policy to, show people, as you said earlier, that, we care about the environment? especially with very few mechanisms put in place to how this fund's going to be used and how to stop the deforestation process.
Yes, you are correct. This is a PR move. This 125 billion in funds, we know how it's going to be used. The funds will appear to go to the country, and then that country, those countries will have to spend that money on American materials or Western projects, Western diktats that control how that money is spent. So that money never winds up alleviating the environmental problems that are plaguing these countries. That money winds up being spent to further exploit and impoverish the people, once again, all under the banner of climate change and helping the people that are the recipients of our largesse, when in reality it's a Trojan horse for continued mining, deforestation, pollution of the rivers. And once again, this shows how not just our money, but our language is commandeered and used for propaganda and PR purposes, because all of these trendy buzzwords such as preventing deforestation, really what we are doing is continuing to degrade the environment. If we substitute the word pollution for environmental degradation, or if we substitute the word pollution for climate change, then the problems and the solutions would become much clearer. Instead of saying climate change, we should say pollution. Instead of saying fossil fuels, we should call it by the correct name: oil, gasoline, liquid natural gas. Because once again, as you point out, the climate change propaganda is a hoax. It is a way to further entrap developing nations into corporate exploitation for American and Western purposes.
As you've said, like, obviously this is all about business, but like, for instance, part of the business deals that are happening right now under the Trump administration is the aggressive tariffs. Do you think that this could possibly accelerate the deforestation by pushing other countries like Brazil to end up ramping up trade at any sort of environmental cost to keep up with these tariffs?
These tariffs are becoming a much larger international issue than Trump anticipated. And that's an excellent point, tying the tariffs into our supposed environmental protections. There is a risk, as we've seen, Brazil, our tariffs drove Brazil into the arms of China, much like our secondary tariffs on India are driving India into the arms of China. Our previous sanctions have driven Russia into the arms of China. So our tariffs have really caused BRICS and the global South and other countries to develop alternative trade arrangements, alternative trade products, and most importantly, alternative payment methods, which does weaken the dollar. It does disrupt American economic hegemony. And these tariffs, the risk of bringing China in is that China has fewer environmental protections than the United States. So we are leaving countries like Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, South America, either at the risk of being exploited by American corporations or at the risk of environmental degradation as they increase trade with China. Indeed, these South American countries, Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, they have vast natural resources, and that is why they are the targets, because many countries and companies desire and lust after their rainforest and their lands, and left to the corporations, they will lose their rainforest and wind up with nothing but monocultures of palm oil, palm trees that are only used to supply Western commercial goods at their own detriment.
All right, thank you, Ginger Chapman, for unpacking the urgent and often overlooked complexity of environmental diplomacy in Latin America. From a war in Europe shaped by memory to a rainforest on the brink shaped by neglect, today's crises reveal a dangerous truth. Without leadership grounded in history and accountability, the future risks becoming unrecognizable. Stay tuned for more on In Focus, other episodes of In Focus. Thank you for watching.